let's go ahead and kick this off. My name is Jonah. I'm the product marketing manager for Stathead, which is a part of Sports Reference. It's a part of Basketball Reference. It's sort of like the upgraded version of Basketball Reference that lets you go inside the database, answer questions that are kind of beyond what you could do with the free version of the site. You could go and see that LeBron averaged 30 points or so last year, but you can use Stathead to see how many times a player his age has done that, or how many seasons he's done that, who's done that the most seasons, all kinds of things like that. So we'll throughout the night we'll be kind of going over some of what you can do in Stathead, as well as taking kind of a look at what is going to happen this year in the NBA season. And I'm thrilled to be joined tonight by one of my coworkers, Mike Lynch, who is the director of data at Sports Reference. He has been with the company for a very long time, does all kinds of incredible stuff for us, and is one of the smartest basketball people I know. There's more about basketball history than anyone else I know. So he's the perfect guest, and there's more about Stathead. So he's the perfect person to have here tonight. So Mike, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and for those of you who are still arriving, thank you for joining us. And for people who come in late, we're recording all of this, so it'll go out, the whole thing. But so far you haven't missed anything, so I should probably save that disclaimer for closer to the middle. But while we're talking, if you have questions, if there's anything that comes up that you'd like to know, any questions you have about using Stathead, any questions about the NBA, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We have Katie Sharp, who is the customer success, who does customer success for Stathead. She's here monitoring the chat, so she'll be able to answer a bunch of your questions. We may also pull them out and answer them on here if it's something that we can demonstrate visually might be easier, or something that people watching the video later might be interested in. So drop your questions in the chat. Go ahead and tell us we're wrong, when we give a hot take, whatever you think. But let's go ahead and get started. So I think the first thing I wanted to ease into this with just some questions about the season, some kind of big picture questions about the NBA, where it's at. So Mike, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to start by asking you just kind of like big picture, the same question I asked everyone who arrived. Who is your pick to win the title this year?
It sort of brings me no pleasure to say this, as I raised a Sixers fan. Still would love to see them win a ring. A lot of chaos there right now, but it like felt to me from like the moment that the Celtics traded for Brogdon, that it just seemed like they had that they added to what was already a really nice core that really clicked down the stretch last year, and came pretty close to winning a title. And like the whole chaos with the coaching situation, the Robert Williams situation where he's going to miss a few months. I think they may not get off to a great start, and if Joe Mazzulla isn't the guy, this could sound like a horrible prediction pretty soon, but it feels to me it's a wide open race. There's probably half a dozen or more teams that I feel like have like a reasonable claim to I feel like we could win one right now. But if I had to pick one, I would probably say Boston. I don't think they're a overwhelming favorite. They've just got like a lot of nice pieces there, a lot of versatility, and could really play some defense this year.
Yeah, they really our numbers love them. Pretty much everybody's numbers loved them last year. Especially once they turned around kind of and cranked up the defense. It's a little scary to me picking them without the coach, just because it seemed like he was such an important part of their turnaround. But I think that the biggest thing I agree with you about is that there's so many teams that could win the title, and a lot of it is like health stuff or just weirdness, like the Clippers. It's like, what if they hit their ceiling? They're a title team. The Nuggets I think could be a title team if everyone's healthy, but it's just hard to know, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned the ceiling of the Clippers. Like I sort of see them like I have felt this way for the last few years, probably that their ceiling feels like the highest if everybody's healthy. They've got all this depth, they could really cause people a lot of problems. But yet it's like at the same time, if you ask me now, like where's this team going to go? It feels like they're just as likely to lose in the first round as they are to win the whole thing, right? So yeah, there's quite a few teams that ought to feel pretty good about their chances. It's probably going to come down to health. What sort of things are out there at the trade deadline and buyouts and things like that, and yeah, it should be a pretty interesting race this year. I don't see like a huge overwhelming favorite like we have had at times in the last 10 to 15 years, where you have like sometimes sort of known who's going to be standing there in June.
Yeah, I remember I working here during all of the Warriors Kevin Durant runs, and there was like so little suspense going into the season because it was like, obviously Durant and the Warriors are going to win the title.
Yeah, it's certainly not a situation like that this year.
So I guess I should go on record with a pick since I made you do it before we move on. I think I said in the chat the Sixers, but that was just the homer. That was kind of the homer pick. I think that the safe bet here is for me is the Bucks. It's not fun to pick like the favorite, but Giannis I think is the best player. We'll do MVP after this and we can talk about that. But I think that they probably had the best team last year and just had some rotten injury luck, losing Middleton for that Celtics series, losing Lopez for so much of the year. And I guess it's one of those things where it's like teams don't usually get more healthy, as their players get older. But I think last year was a strange situation because they had to play the shortened season all the way into the finals. Middleton and Holiday went to the Olympics, and then they had to go straight into the next year, and that's just a lot of basketball. So I like the Bucks to kind of get healthy, get right, and probably storm to another title.
They're like definitely right up there. Yeah, you can flip a coin.
So what would be you're a Philly, lifelong Philly fan. I've adopted the Sixers since I moved here. Obviously, one of the big things that we followed was the MVP race last year. Nikola Jokic, and they ended up winning his second one over Joel Embiid. But the main thing that I noticed when you look at the MVP race is just the number of insanely talented players who are like in the conversation, and if any one of them, if things break right, could be in it. So I don't know, who's your pick for MVP this year?
I like took a little heat in these parts because I felt like last year that Jokic should get it. I love Embiid, but it felt like Jokic was the rightful winner. I just thought he had slightly better season. They both had excellent seasons. And I mean, I sort of feel like there's no way that Jokic is going to win it this year because I just feel like there's this thing like there's going to be a lot of voters aren't going to want to give him 3 in a row when he hasn't won a ring the last 2 years. It like sort of feels like I think no one has won 3 in a row since Bird back in the 80s, and before him I think you probably have to go back to Wilt, and so it just seems like even if Jokic is somehow better this year than he was last year, you would think that the Nuggets are going to be better than they were last year as they get some bodies back. It would be hard to see him winning it this year, which sort of narrows it down a little bit to me. Embiid has been the runner-up the last 2 years. The question with him is always going to be how many games are you going to get out of him? And so I wouldn't necessarily bet on the 70 plus games that you're probably going to need to win an MVP from him. I would expect him to have a huge season, but just his health track record makes it such that I wouldn't necessarily say this is who I think is going to win the MVP. And so now I'm sort of down to like Giannis and Luka sort of strike me as probably the 2 candidates that I would be looking at the most. Obviously, Giannis has won it before. Luka has not, so maybe there's like a slight bias to go to Luka. And I think, I mean, he's an incredible player. He got to play a bit late in the summer in like some very strong Euro games. And he like seemed like he was in great form. But yet I feel like Milwaukee is probably going to have the better record, even though I would expect that the Mavericks have a good season. And so if I had to pick between one of those, I would probably say Giannis, but it feels like a coin flip to me on whether I would say him or Luka, really.
For those of you who are interested in the MVP race, we have a really cool tool on Basketball Reference. So it's on the free side of the site that tracks MVP odds during the season based on the stats that the players are putting up and how voters have historically weighed those stats. So you can follow the ebbs and flows of the race. It's a very fun page. I check that page every day during the season. I wonder, Mike, do you think like last year Jokic was far and away the leader in that sort of MVP predictor, but the vote was much closer than, or at least the narrative was much closer than it indicated, probably somewhat for narrative reasons. So do you think this year the person who leads in that MVP predictor will win the MVP, or do you think that there may be like narrative? I guess what I'm asking is, do you think Jokic will probably by the numbers deserve a third MVP and not win it?
That is an interesting question. I would tend to say that if he is leading that MVP predictor, that I may take it a little bit more of a grain of salt, just because I know that we haven't built in a factor there that is like, has this player won 2 MVPs in a row and not gotten a ring during that time?
Yeah, like,
which
are the
will
voters
sort,
tired of him?
yeah, and it's like, to some extent I'm projecting there a bit, like just expecting that this is the way that voters may treat it, and it could be a bad read on like my part, but I would just, yeah, it had Jokic, and this is not his fault at all, but had he led that team to a title last year, it would be easier to see you know the voters feeling like, all right, we're going to give it to this guy once again if he has the same type of year. I just want to reemphasize, it's not like I'm saying that he should have won a ring with that team last year. I mean, they were very short staffed, obviously.
Yeah, it was remarkable that he got the team as far as he did, given the personnel around him. So we got some interesting questions from people who RSVP'd, from viewers, about kind of the picture of the league, but I want to get to the Stathead stuff, and then if there's time, we'll circle back to this. But let's move on to Stathead, which is obviously, as I mentioned before, it's basically like a series of tools that let you go inside the Basketball Reference database and sort of answer the questions that come up when you're looking at someone's Basketball Reference page, and really let you kind of go deeper, just answer really interesting questions that you wouldn't think that you'd be able to answer, using our site. So I guess I have some questions here from people, but I just want to start by just asking Mike, what are some of your favorite tools to use, or maybe some of the searches that you go to, throughout the season when you're trying to follow what's going on?
Yeah, so I guess like to sort of tie it into like a storyline that I'm really like excited about, a player that we haven't mentioned yet, Zion Williamson, will be back. He's looked like he's in the best shape that we've seen him in, like maybe since Duke, in the preseason here. And like one of the like searches that I really like, you look at his player page, and he's played a nice round number of career games, 85, and you see he's got 2,187 points in his career. It's like, all right, well, how does that sort of line up in like all-time points scored through 85 games. And there's actually a couple of our tools that you could use to get that, but one of them is the span finder.
So I'm going to share my screen to show you all
Oh,
how
perfect.
to do this search while Mike kind of narrates. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let people know what's going on.
Sure. Yeah. And so if you set it to game spans, there's like those 4 options up top, so you could search for most points through 2 seasons if you did season spans, or since, we're talking 85 games, so you would do game spans. For Zion, you wouldn't want to do like day spans because quite a few months and years have like passed over this time. And then you can see fastest and slowest to certain milestones, which is cool too. But for the game spans, if you can set it to any span of games that you want, so that span length box there, you can change that from 5 to 85. 5 is just the default there, and then underneath that, where it says span start or end, it says any span is the default. We would want to do from the start of a career down there, but there's all kinds of cool options there that you can play with. And then so we'll just limit this to the regular season also, obviously. And then so this basically pulls from our collection of box scores, which we have a box score for every game in NBA history, ABA history, BAA history, which is sort of the precursor to the NBA, and is counted as official NBA history. The search that we're running right now will not include ABA, but that is a filter that you can turn on and off as well. Something that we'll mention with the span finder, as the note on the screen says, these searches are pretty intensive because it's basically, it's pretty incredible that it could even do this. And the programming wizards that we have that build this stuff, that are a lot smarter than me, know how to do this stuff, where it's, what it needs to do is search the first 85 games of every single player's career. And so no surprise here, the Wilt Chamberlain is way ahead of everyone else. And then you get to Walt Bellamy, who also had, I think he was over 30 points a game as a rookie a couple years after Wilt. Oscar, Kareem, just some of these real legends of the game. And then you got Michael Jordan is the first more sort of modern guy that you have on there. And after Jordan, as far as guys since the merger, Zion is number 2 there. I see Billy Knight and David Thompson. I guess those are both technically post-merger stints, but they had both already been pros in the ABA pre-merger. Along the same lines, you have George Mikan up there, who had been a pro before he came to the BAA as well. He started with the Chicago Gears over in the NBL. And so it's basically modern post-merger history. You've got Michael Jordan, then you've got Zion. We've not had Zion Williamson for, since May of 2021. I'm pretty pumped to have him back. So it will be really interesting to see if he's able to pick up where he left off, or even get it a bit better, because we've never really seen him in shape as a pro. And if he ever gets there, it's a little bit scary to think what that might look like.
And it's cool to think about it too, given how much better the team is now than the one he had when we last saw him.
Yeah, the offense that they could theoretically put together is pretty scary, with all the guys that score with pretty good efficiency there, and a lot of them that can create their own stuff too. And sort of along those lines, one of the other cool searches that I like is in the player season finder.
There we go.
Where so you can search for a single season, but there's also an option to the right of that to search for combined seasons or careers. And benching criteria is the second one there. And in the sort by tab, so the default there is win shares. You can actually set it to points per 36 minutes. There's all kind, you can do it per possession, per minute. And so sort of staying on the Zion Williamson thing, he has never played a ton of minutes, but he's always scored a lot of points. And if you want to see where that stacks up all time, to filter out, the random players who have scored 2 points in 1 minute of their career. If you go down, there are filters for the statistical filters. You can set minutes played. I don't know, put minutes played at like 2,500. So that's like a season's worth of minutes or so, which is about what he's got. And you can actually change the stats to display to per 36 also if you want. You don't have to. The search will still work if you don't do that. And then this one should run relatively quickly. And we'll see who comes back. I would think that Zion is up there. Yep. So Embiid, Zion, and Jordan are your top three all time there. Obviously, Embiid and Zion have both missed a lot of time in their careers and have yet to play sort of the Wizards years, if you will, that sort of drag down Jordan's numbers there a bit. There's quite a few active guys up there. Even beyond that, you've got Luka, Trey, Durant, Harden, Freeman Williams. That's a great one. Rest in peace. I believe he passed away within the last year or so, but he was, I think he is the all-time leader in like shots attempted per minute. I think he's maybe still number 2 to Pete Maravich on the college scoring list too, unless he got passed by Chris Clemens or something. But
At least
there we go. Freeman Williams. Amazing. More shots than Jordan. So he was not shy. So like this is just a neat way to sort of look at just how crazy scoring is these days. This is not to say that these guys are better scorers than Jordan. Scoring seems like it's become a lot easier these days than it was, particularly in like the second half of Jordan's career. The 80s were a bit easier to score in than the 90s for the most part. But I just always like to play around with like that one, see where Embiid ranks, see where Zion ranks.
Yeah, it's interesting to me to see like Durant and LeBron also in the top 10, considering that they're in LeBron certainly at the end-ish of his career. Durant's in his mid-30s. They're closer to that MJ Warriors or MJ Wizards era than a young guy like Zion or Luka.
Yeah, it's crazy. Particularly, LeBron. I mean, he's over like 50 or 60,000 minutes now too. I think if you add the playoffs, which is just an insane load. It's there's a lot of guys that are still scoring a lot of points as they age. And another thing that I like in Stathead, you talk about the MVP race last year between Embiid and Jokic. If you go to the player comparison finder, is a pretty handy way to like compare. You can do up to 6 players at a time, and then you can put in as many guys as you want. I think those were the main 3 candidates last year, right? And may very well be once again this year. I would think that Luka probably finds his way into the conversation this year. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can compare them on a per game basis. The totals, that per 36, as we mentioned before, even per 100 possessions, which is especially handy, like in a situation like if you have, say if someone from the 1991 like Nuggets had like actually been a candidate for a big award, you might want to use the per possession just because they played so much faster than everyone else in the league. Tends to not be quite that kind of variance these days, but can still be useful, and very useful for making comparisons over time. The advanced table underneath that is where you see Jokic really separated himself in things like BPM and VORP, where he just had a historical season. The combination of rebounding and like passing just really made him look good in that metric, and obviously the shooting efficiency through the roof as well. The adjusted shooting underneath that is really cool too.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Sorry to interrupt, but we actually got a question from one of the people at the webinar tonight about how to compare players across eras. And so I wanted to mention that we have this adjusted shooting. So why don't you explain how all this works?
Yeah, it's the reason that we added this a couple of years ago was basically every single season, new records were being set for true shooting percentage. And it wasn't all necessarily due to some massive increase in skill, like free throw percentage was staying a little bit more constant. It just seemed like it had a lot to do with the way that the league was being refereed. And so, you know, it got to a point like, all right, how do I compare someone whose prime was in 98, 99 when the league true shooting percentage was about, 10 percentage points lower or so to one of these guys now. And so we did this league adjusted shooting that sort of normalizes everything to the league like average that season. So if your true shooting percentage is 55% in a season in which the league wide true shooting percentage was 55%, you're graded as a 100, where a 100 is average. 90 would be like 10%, and so it's not 10 percentage points, but 10% worse than the league average, or 110 would be 10% better. And so if one guy had that 55 true shooting percentage in a league season in which the average was like 50%, you can see that that player was a better shooter for his era than the one whose 55 was done in an era where that was what the average player shot. I hope the way that I explained that made any sense. And we sort of, everything is on this 100 point scale where 100 is average, over 100 is better, under 100 is worse, except those last two columns, FG add and TS add, sort of add a volume component to it. So like, Giannis had a TS plus, which would be his number for true shooting adjusted to the league average of 112. Well, somebody who took like 30 shots may have a 120. It's like, oh, this 120 is better than 112. If you look at the TS add column, you can see how many points Giannis scored over what like a league average shooter would have done with his shot attempts. And one of the things that you see that is kind of funny there, Embiid, if you look only at his field goals, is like a league average kind of guy, right? Like he takes a pretty tough mix of shots, especially for someone his size, a lot of mid range, but he's so good at baiting foul calls that those 160 extra points or so are almost all coming from the free throws that are included in the true shooting that aren't in the field goals. And so, whereas you see Giannis, most of his stuff comes from field goals, and Jokic to even a greater extent is this incredible field goal shooter, doesn't get to the free throw line nearly as much as the first two there.
Yeah, if you're interested in digging into this stuff, in addition to the shooting stats, we have free throw rate and 3-point attempt rate plus, which do the same thing for the rates they're getting. So like what Mike was saying, you can see Embiid and Giannis got a very similar free throw rate compared to league average, but their free throw percentage was different. Giannis, as we know, slightly below average when it comes to free throw shooting. Embiid slightly above average, and so that you can see translates to a big difference when it comes to the true shooting added. I think those stats are really cool. They're very interesting to look at, and definitely in these player comparison finders where you're doing like if you're doing historic players to modern players, I think that's a table that's definitely worth checking out, even though it's a little further down the page.
Absolutely.
So we got some questions from users that I wanted to get to and just kind of show how to do it, how to do the stuff they're talking about. So one question that they asked that I wanted to address is someone said, how do you search for multiple players on one team who are making an impact? So for example, four players who are averaging 20 points per game on a team. And the way you do that is in the season finder. We just over the spring and summer rolled out some cool new updates to the season finder and the game finder. So you saw earlier when we were talking about these different search types, these ones on the bottom are new, and they can let you do searches like this. So for this one, I would go to this search type, find most players on a team in a season matching criteria. And then I would go down to the statistical filters and I would do 20 points per game. And then when I run that search, in just a couple seconds, I'll get a list of every team who had players who do that in order most to least. So we can see here that there are 4 teams where they had a player who averaged at least 20 points per game. And going to the point that we've been talking about, the scoring is way up. 3 of those happened in just the last couple of years. So that's the kind of thing you can do. And then you could also do, if you only cared about a single game, you could do the same sort of search in the game finder by going once again to search types and finding number of players on a team matching criteria in a game. And then again, I'll go to statistical filters and do points and set it at 20. And then after just a couple of seconds, we'll get that same list on a single game basis. So this will be single games with the most players who scored 20 points as soon as it's done running, which should just be a second. But yeah, I don't know, Mike, what of the kind of new stuff that we added in the oh, here it is. So here are the results. You can see lots of teams had 5 players do it. So not too uncommon, but doesn't happen all the time either. It's 53 examples on there. So Mike, of those kind of new searches, is there any stuff that you find yourself using or anything you thought was especially cool?
Yeah, I definitely big fan of this feature here because it's like sometimes you never know what it's going to be. Some random thing happens in a game during a season, and you're just like the Grizzlies have 9 different guys score 10 points or something, like one of these like deeper teams in recent years. And you're just like, I wonder, has like that ever happened before? Or when's the last time that that's happened? And that's a functionality that I've been looking forward to for some time. I like love that we have a way to sort of group teams in a game to see, if the teammates score 40 points, if teammates, each have 15 rebounds or 2 teammates with 10 assists, that like sort of thing. I just was really glad to see that get added. And I'll look forward to playing with it during a full season now, basically.
Yeah, I'm really glad we have that in there. I think it's gonna be really cool. So we got another question that was, how can casual fans download and analyze data? So I just wanted to take this opportunity to mention that every table that you generate in Stathead can be downloaded onto your computer. The way you do it is very simple. I'll use this one as an example, even though there's may not be a reason why you would want to download this table. It's the same with every table on Stathead. Right up over here where it says query results, right next to it, there's a little thing that says export data. And you can see when I hover my mouse over it, a drop-down menu appears. So you have a few options here. This first one that says modify, export, and share table. When I click on that, I actually have the option to remove rows from the table. If there are rows that I don't need or columns that I'm not interested in, I can hit that little circle X and get rid of those. And then once you have the table looking the way you want, you can get an HTML version that you can copy and paste onto your website. You can get a Reddit code or Billboard code. You can get the URL, but obviously it's easier to just click the share results, and that will also give you a URL that you can use. But in addition to these options, for kind of copying and pasting the table on the web, we also have download options. So you can click Get as Excel Workbook, and that'll, as soon as you click that, it'll download a CSV file onto your computer with the table. Or you can click Get Table as a CSV, and that'll transform the table into a CSV format that you can copy and paste into whatever you need. So we get that question, pretty frequently. So I just wanted to take some time to just show you that you can do that with any table. Obviously, the only caveat there is that it's the table that's displayed. So you can see we showed 200 rows of that table, but obviously there were games where 2 guys had 20 points that aren't showing up here, or 3. So if you wanted to download the whole set of results in a sample this big, you would have to click next page and keep downloading it through to get the full results. But that's a really handy feature that I actually use far more than I would have expected, just to like calculate stuff on my own, or just when I'm trying to find certain things. It comes in handy. So thank you for that question. We got another one that I wanted to bring you in on, Mike, which was kind of, it was a broad question, but it was basically, I'm looking at box scores, I watch highlights, I get that level of NBA analysis, but I want to become an expert. I want to take it to the next level. So what are some Stathead tools or some advanced stats or some kind of more advanced stuff that you like looking at that let you go beyond the sort of like points, assists, rebounds by single players?
Yeah, I guess it's a little hard to know exactly what this person is maybe getting at, and if they happen to be in the chat, please feel free to follow up. But I get the feeling that the advanced play-by-play tools would maybe be something that they're would be looking for, and these are, so broadly speaking, the player and the team tools are sort of parsing data from our player pages, like season-long stats you would find on a player page, and stats from our box scores, so game level stuff, or in the case of the score finder and the player quarter finder, sort of quarter level stats. But the advanced play-by-play tools are actually like querying the play-by-play that we have for games. And if you're not familiar, we have play-by-play for every NBA game since 96, 97, which is sort of, for whatever reason, is just the earliest that fully digitized data exists for NBA games. And so what that means is basically every action that then ends up in a box score is sort of recorded in these play-by-plays. And so scoring plays, you will know if there was an assister, who it was, the distance of the shot, when it happened in a game, rebounds, assists, turnovers, blocks, steals, etc., are all recorded in there in order, and like you sort of know which 10 players are on the floor when all of them happened, as well as the game situation. The team was winning, losing, by
I'm
how
just
much.
an example so people can see it. This is
Sure.
from the WNBA finals, but this is what that's the plus minus. This is what the play-by-play looks like. Sorry, just
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's probably much more useful me trying to describe. Yeah. So you can see all of these actions are sort of things that then get tallied within the box score but this just shows you in greater detail. And so what those like advanced play-by-play tools are is they harness this information. And so it's you could pull some pretty good nuggets out of there. The stuff about lineups can be particularly like useful, especially when you get into the playoffs and stuff. And like your best 5-man units are really going to be seeing the bulk of the minutes at that point and seeing just how dominant they can be. And so, for single games, you have a little bit of small sample size theater going on, but you can, and you got to reach like a point of the season where there's like enough of a sample size. But if you do the cumulative games option there in the middle, you can basically choose to sum all of the games in that season or any subset of games that you want. And this is once again a tool where the statistical filters can be helpful, although not so much, on this raw points, you wouldn't need it as much. But say if you wanted to sort by best point per 100 possessions then you would probably want to use a statistical filter and look for lineups that played maybe 200 minutes with each other at least, or something like that, just to sort of pull something out. And you would probably see like almost like magical sorts of lineups at the top. Like this is the lineup that the Celtics more or less rode to the finals last year. All right, I'm getting excited about the Sixers. There's a good one for Harden and Embiid there.
I wouldn't have guessed Matisse would be in a top 2 lineup, but
yeah, I guess this was regular season, obviously. Yeah, so that Brunson and Luka last year really did some things with each other. So yeah, and you can sort of flip this as well. If you go back, you can sort. I'm going to get lost. Well, okay. You know what? There's probably because we use the 200 minimum. There's probably enough. There's probably few enough that they're all on this table, right? So we can just resort. Yeah. So there's only
like 34.
There's only 34 lineups that even fit this. Yeah. So you can just resort. Sort of no surprise. Some of the teams you see there at the bottom. Interestingly. Is that the same Sixers lineup with Seth in there instead of Harden, huh?
That's really interesting.
That's kind of mind blowing. Wouldn't have guessed that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he played really well last year.
That's like a 30 points per 100 swing by adding Harden.
That's pretty. Yeah, I guess maybe Thibault played a lot better with Harden than he did. That there was no real point guard in that lineup. I like sort of guess, but yeah, I mean they were playing well before that trade though. That one is very surprising to me. Anyways, I obviously hadn't run this search recently.
Yeah, me either. But this is exactly the point we're making, that you can find this crazy fascinating stuff in here and suddenly find yourself going down this rabbit hole. Like I would absolutely love to go look at Seth's page right now and figure out what was going on when he was on the floor, what was going on with Harden after he got traded. So yeah, that's a pretty good demonstration of what we're talking about.
And probably my favorite tool within these play-by-play ones, because everyone loves scoring, or at least I do, is the shot finder. I think is really, really cool. Let you get over to that one.
Sorry. Yeah.
And this basically like allows you to search for any shot attempt in the last 25 or 26 seasons of basketball, which is really, really cool. And I guess I'll ask you to run this one just as a little special something for a player who's at the end of his career now, and has a lot of people who love him and a lot of people who hate him. So I would ask you to first set the game type to either.
Either.
So we get playoffs and regular season. And for the shot filters, let's see, quarter, fourth and overtime, there's like that little red button. So this will only include shots from the fourth quarter and overtime. And we will set the time remaining. If you could set that to 5 seconds or less. Let's see. Another shot filter would be scoring margin. And if you could cross off the one that, for shot to take lead, please.
Okay.
And then if you go back up to the top, we want this to be find shots in combined seasons or careers, and then sort by field goals. I think this should do it. So this is basically who was the leader since 1996-97 in go-ahead shots in the last 5 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime. There it is, Melo.
Carmelo. Wow.
Yeah, got a lot of detractors. You know, there's a lot of things in his game that he doesn't do. But this is, and I'm not some huge fan of his game. You know, I don't think he's like on the level of some of the other guys on that list. But if I had a vote, I would vote Melo into the Hall for sure. He's always had a knack in that moment, and you can see, you know, 19 out of 56 looks bad, right? That 33.9 field goal percentage, but these shots are very hard to make. Teams always run ridiculously bad plays and just ask one guy to be the hero, generally because they don't want to give the other team a chance to score, so they're not really running their stuff. You know, and so you can see Kobe was about 10 percentage points worse on these. LeBron is a 19.2% shooter. If you scroll down a little bit more, there's another little gem in here, because you see all these terrible field goal percentages, and then you get to Michael Jordan, 8 for 17, and we're talking about 96-97. That's only Jordan's final 2 years with the Bulls and 2 years with the Wizards that are covered here. So it would be really fascinating to know what that number looked like over a larger sample size, which maybe one day we'll know. But and then another crazy thing about LeBron is I think in only the playoffs, like out of those 15 makes, like I think if you restricted it to just playoffs, I think almost all of his are in the playoffs. His makes and his regular season percentage is like so 15 to 78 overall, but in the playoffs he's 7 of 15. Meaning, so what is he? 8 for 63 in the regular season and 7 of 15 in the playoffs, which is pretty crazy. You know, and a lot of those are pure buzzer beaters too, obviously.
And those are against like much better teams than like the sample that you would get in the regular
in
season.
Much bigger moments. Yeah, it's like none of these are, you know, February games against well, I'd like don't want to pick on some bad team, but you know, there's been plenty of them out there during his career.
Bad team out there.
Yes, exactly.
Trae Young 2 for 2 on these.
Wow. Okay.
So
Al Horford 2 for 2.
Yeah.
Stockton 2. You know, I certainly one of those Stockton ones would be the one to send the Jazz over the Rockets into the finals.
I remember the OG Anunoby one. That was in the bubble. That was against.
That's right.
Heat, I think.
Yep. Ron Artest, the putback of Kobe's air ball to beat the Grizzlies.
Yeah. So we're starting to we're pretty much at time. We could obviously keep doing this for many more hours, as you can tell. I do want to I saw we had a question in the chat. Let me just take a look here and see if there are any of these. Sorry if you hear that banging. My dog is trying to eat one of my poster frames. He always likes to make a cameo appearance in one of these in all these webinars. I guess it's gone now. I saw someone asking how we get the players on the front page, how we choose those. It's just random. It's just a totally random thing. And then I guess I'll leave it with one last question, and then we can go. I know Mike's a Phillies fan and I'm a Braves fan, so we're setting aside our differences for this higher cause of Stathead basketball today. Something truly important, you know. But before you go, Mike, we got a question about rookies, and I know you're a big college basketball fan, so it's just someone who was asking like, what rookies should we watch out for outside of the big the big ones that everybody knows? Are there any you're excited to see in the league?
You know, I'm honestly not terribly excited about this rookie class. It feels like all of the attention is already on next year's draft, which sort of feels like probably a more special one. I will say one of the wagers that I placed before the season was I like Paolo to outscore DeJounte Murray this year. I think I was getting something like plus 160 odds there. Banchero reminds me a lot of Michael Beasley type of play, and I don't mean that as an insult. Like I mean that as like a guy who can just go out there and get buckets pretty easily. I think that the Magic will have a lot of reasons to give him the ball and try to develop and learn through mistakes. So
I was positive
would expect him to score some points. Yeah, some nights the game looks very easy for Michael Beasley, but maybe too easy to the point. He didn't seem to please too many of the coaches that he's had over the years. But yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for a hour of basketball talk. We're going to send the recording of this out to you in email. So if there's anything that we went over that you want to, let me stop sharing my screen there. So if there's anything we went over that you want to review or take another look at, just go ahead and you can watch it again on the video. If you have any questions that we didn't get to or anything comes up as you're exploring Stathead, we love helping you out. So you can email us at support@stathead.com, or you can hit us up on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook at Stathead. You can also hit up at bball_ref on Twitter. That's basketball reference. Either way, we'll be happy to help you. Mike, is there anything you want to plug? Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a long time user of Stathead, and lots of new stuff that's rolled out recently, and I know that there'll be more stuff to come out during the season. I would just say, if you're in the chat, I think that Katie's probably been answering a lot of your questions. If you email us, she'll get back to you also, and she knows this stuff cold. She'll help you find what you're looking for, and help you answer questions. And I'm just really excited that basketball is almost back. So just looking forward to a fun season.
We're less than a week away. I can't wait. I'm very excited. So thank you all again for joining us. And yeah, thanks to Katie for monitoring the chat and answering your questions. As you can tell, she knows so much about Stathead that, if there's anything you're struggling to find, she can help you out. I do want to mention too, that if you haven't signed up for Stathead, you can try it for free. You get 1 month for free when you sign up for a monthly subscription. So sign up today, give it a try during the first month of the season, and you'll see that you need to have it all year. You can also get a bit of a discount off the monthly rate if you sign up for an annual subscription. It comes out to roughly paying 9 months for 12. So if for sure, I just want to do Stathead, I'd say just go for the annual one. But either way, we hope you give it a try, and we hope you enjoy the NBA season, and hope your team wins. And yeah, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties there at the beginning, but hope you all have a great rest of your evening.